VikesNow. I am Dustin Baker. I'm here with Josh Fry, our routine weekly guest, but we have a special new guest, and that is Alec Lewis from The Athletic. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you guys for having me. I mean, we're recording early morning these days. These training camp days are long, so you can probably see the fatigue in my eyes, but doing my best to power through, and I'm having a blast, really, honestly, being out there and watching this thing develop.
Excellent. And then I know you got to this team, started covering this team sometime last year. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was last year, right before the first game of the season. So I didn't even have training camp last year. Like I remember, I've told people this, but I remember like one of the first days I was out at the facility at TCO, like Zadarius Smith was holding court at his locker talking about Aaron Rodgers, and here I am, this young guy who covered Major League Baseball, and I'm like, for lack of a better word, like what the hell is going on? Like it was that much of a whirlwind for me, but the season didn't really slow down in terms
No.
of the mayhem of it, and it was a blast. But I've part of what has been fun thus far about camp is like you feel it building and you feel kind of where things are going, and I feel like it'll help me as the season happens kind of have a better perspective on what I'm seeing and why certain things are playing out.
I think I remember that Zadarius interview. He was pretty colorful that afternoon, talking about how he wanted to get to Aaron, and he said something like "put fear in his heart" or something like that.
Yeah, and it was fresh off, I believe, Tyler Dunn, who has this great Substack, Go Long,
Hmm.
had done an interview with him, and Zadarius in there was pretty colorful too. So it was like, again, for me, I was just like, this is so out of like it was an out of body thing. Like Aaron Rodgers, this guy I grew up watching like I mean, I say as a kid, I'm still, I guess, a kid, but it's like that. It was yeah, no, it was crazy, but it was so fun. I mean, I there were multiple times last year where I had to remind myself, and even my parents were saying to me and friends, like, be grateful for the games you're seeing because some of this is not normal.
No, it wasn't
Yeah.
that one iota. That's why, even though they were severely disappointing against the Giants in the postseason, I look back and even tell my wife, I'm like, God, that season, that was like, walking away from a loss, a wild card loss at home. I can't discount how fun that season was because it was memory after memory, and each game you had to fasten your seatbelt. So, well, we got a series. We got probably about we'll go for about 20 minutes. I think we got 6 or 7 questions. I'm going to start with Josh. Why don't you start firing away with some of these burning questions we got for Alec, who is at Vikings training camp?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing, obviously, with Brian Flores coming in running the defense, it seems like it's going to be very different from what Ed Donatel ran last year. From an outsider's perspective, it seems like there's a different kind of energy in the building right now. So, I guess my first question is just does it feel like there's a different kind of energy with the defense this year? And who do you think has the most to gain from being in a Brian Flores scheme this season?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's a different energy. Obviously, because I wasn't here in last year's training camp, I don't know really the initial immediate reaction that these guys had to Ed Donato. And I wrote this the other day, but it's like you won't find anybody who will dunk on Ed Donato in that building. Like a lot of people have
Mm-hmm.
respect for him. Now, that is not to say that the defense was not putrid and that the fans shouldn't dunk on Ed Donato. I would never tell anybody whatever how to. But I think to get back to your question, Brian Flores, you can tell he is very deliberate with everything he does. I mean, his first press conference, he said, he's like, we're going to be aggressive. We're not going to play reckless. And so the way I've described, I think this defense, like it's going to be orchestrated chaos. Guys going to be flying around in all different places. On the defensive front, they're going to be moving around. On the back end, they're going to be moving around. And I think they're going to do it with a full kind of confidence and understanding that they're going to be able to do that fast. And so who has most to gain? I mean, the first name that just comes to mind, just off yesterday, is Daniil Hunter. I mean, Brian Flores was asked, what do you think about dropping Daniil into coverage at all? And Brian Flores was like, tongue in cheek, like, I like him going forwards and I don't like him going backwards as much. And that was like, okay, I mean, that is what Daniil's strong suit is. So that's where I start. I mean, I think you can mention a ton of names, whether it's the young cornerbacks or Lewis Seen, even maybe him being able to play faster. You can mention Brian Asamoah, who I think is going to play a big role. But yeah, I mean, I think the defense is going to be so different that who has the most to gain is a tough one to peg because I think a lot of guys are probably going to benefit from just the evolution of this thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, personally, the first thing for me, I think it's Jordan Hicks, honestly, because with how little blitzing he did last season, I think that's going to be completely different this year. And yeah, like you said, there's just so many different guys. It's going to be really interesting to watch for sure.
No, and I think Jordan Hicks is a great name to bring up. I mean, I think last year in the defense, if you watch the tape and watch those games, like those linebackers were having to do so much passing off routes, communicating each other. And while I think that may exist a little bit, I think it's going to be much more of like this is where you need to be, or this is the man you got, and it keeps things a little more simple. And I don't say that as a bad thing. And I think that's always like if you talk about defensive evolution and scheme in general, the biggest challenge is like how do we make things complicated for the offense but easy for us? And I think last year that balance was not really struck very well. It felt like it was too complex for the guys and not complex enough for the offenses they face. So I do feel like that is kind of a thematic element of what we're going to see.
I on this show especially when the Vikings were hot and it looked like they could be a team of destiny. I always said whatever he's got up his sleeve for the fourth quarter, just do that all the time. Don't wait till the fourth quarter to get good. It was so frustrating. And then ultimately it was exposed in the wild card game. And I think that needed to happen for them to make the move. One other thing, or an additional thing I should say. So you've talked about how young you are. So when you were a kid, or perhaps before you were even born, the kicker spot has given the Vikings fans heartburn. And almost annually now, since Blair Walsh missed his infamous kick in 2015, we have a kicker battle. And this last year, it was only in spirit because they had a rookie guy that came in. He was gone within a month. But this year, especially after an interview with Matt Daniels, I believe late last week, it sounds like there's an honest to goodness kicker battle, not just something to push Greg Joseph to the limit based on Daniel's words. So I want to ask you, in your perception, is this kicker thing a true coin flip, or is it more like, 80% that Joseph will probably win?
I would say the latter. That's probably, I think, Greg Joseph and just the familiarity with that entire room. I think I would probably lean that way. But I mean, it's funny because I with this conversation, like some of the reporters are charting every kick the entire day, 7 for 8 and 9, and I'm like, should I be doing that? Does a kick July 30th? Does the kick results in July 30th? Does that matter? But I mean, I do. Jack Pilesny had a lot of success at Georgia, and he does look to have a pretty strong leg. Like that was something I remember talking with Judd Zolgad about, like in the spring. We're just like, I mean, man, this guy can really kick it. So you never know. But I would say if I was pegging it, I would lean Greg Joseph heavily just because of the familiarity with the coaching staff, with teammates. I mean, that room of DePaula, Ryan Wright, and Greg Joseph, they are very close. They hang out together all the time. And though this is a business that is a results-based bottom line business, like if Greg Joseph is missing kicks, he's 2 for 9 every practice, then we'll probably have to talk about it. But I think right now I would lean Joseph heavily, probably.
Okay, that makes sense. And that's what I thought before the Daniels interview. And I couldn't tell if it was fluff to make it a true blue competition, or if it was kind of Joseph heavy. And it sounds, at least for now, while you chart your kicks, it's the latter.
So
go ahead. I was gonna say it's funny because it's not just kicks. Like some people are like, yeah, Nick Mullins is 4 for 9, and I'm like, I mean, I don't like, and I'm like, I don't want to look like I'm slacking, but like, I don't know. Weighing the importance of that is in a July training camp practices, like joint practices, I'll definitely be charting, but it is that's been in terms of the training camp experience. That's been a fun little test of myself of whether to do it or not.
No, you're doing it right. I was at the night practice 2 years ago with my family, and a guy named Jake Browning, who now could be the QB1 for week 1 for the Bengals. He had what some folks believed was a real good night scrimmage, and real prominent reporters wrote stuff on real prominent websites that says it looks like QB2 is Jake Browning's to lose. And I watched it right there, and I was like, he wasn't that good. And I was like, what am I missing? Do I just like Kellen Mond that much more? What's the deal? And then Browning was cut with roster cuts. So yeah, I would encourage you to keep that objective hat rather rather than get invested in a July 30th field goal.
Yeah, it's like people have made fun of me a little bit with Jaron Hall. Like last week, he had a really good practice, and I wrote about him twice this summer, mostly because it was like they just drafted this guy as a quarterback. I'm kind of fascinated by BYU's offense. Why not talk to people around him? And someone the other day, after I tweeted something positive about Jaron's practice, it was like, "This is the most annoying thing about you." I'm like, if that's the most annoying thing about me, then I will gladly be okay with it. But yeah, it was no, it's one of those things where you just try to your point, be objective about what you see. And we're not, I mean, I don't know. I guess I could lie and act like I'm the foremost expert on quarterback mechanics, but or kicking mechanics, but I'm just not. So you do your best and try to have conversations with people in the building who can fill in the gaps a little bit.
For sure. You mentioned the draft picks. Keeping with that theme, something I get into every single year is just studying all these draft prospects coming out of college. And I find myself rooting for a lot of these guys. But last year, didn't get to see a ton of the rookies out on the field other than Ed Ingram, few splashes of Brian Asamoah and Caleb Evans here and there before he got hurt. But which 2022 draft pick so far in the first few days of camp has really stood out to you the most so far this training camp period?
Yeah, I would say a Caleb Evans in terms of, I mean, he's gotten a lot of snaps with the ones. And I mean, I just think alongside Byron Murphy Jr., you're going to see Caleb Evans. That would be like a base personnel. I think in more of a nickel, you're still going to see a Caleb Evans. Like I expect him and just like in the pecking order right now, it looks like he is that guy. I mean, he's more of the lengthier corner that I think Brian Flores would like, but he also I think has some zone drop ability and reaction processing ability. So he would be probably the foremost guy. I mean, I've heard good things about Ed Ingram year over year, but until I see real contact padded against other teams, I don't know if I want to go there. I mean, Andrew Booth has shown some flashes. Lewis Cine obviously made the play this weekend that I think a lot of people saw and were raving about, and I was impressed. I sat down with Lewis Cine last week. I was impressed with just his ability, his responsibility of like, I didn't do anything last year. I got to go prove it. And I just thought that was exactly probably what he needs to be saying. And so those are the guys I'll say. I mean, Jalen Naylor is another one who performed really well out of the gate, but then had a little injury. I expect him back earlier this week, but another one to watch. And I just think with the wide receiver room, with KJ Osborne in a contract year, if you had another guy develop like a Jalen Naylor, that'd be a pretty interesting development for this team.
Yeah, I think if you're right and Caleb Evans ends up being that starting caliber guy, I mean, that CB room is wide open right now. It's about as wide open as any in the league. And having a guy like Caleb be able to come in, I think last year he showed a lot of what he can do, especially physically against other defense or against offenses. Didn't really seem scared at all out there when he got on the field. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do this year for sure.
The other thing with him is he was very rigorous in terms of his like study last year. He was very Patrick Peterson probably got annoyed with how much Caleb was trying to learn from him. But I do expect, I mean, it is a wide open room, so I don't expect that conversation to be over. And I will also say that I've been really impressed by Mekhi Blackman throughout camp. So we'll see how it shakes out. But Caleb Evans, I think, has done a lot to put himself in a really good position.
All right, Alec, this is the one that prompted me about 6 weeks ago to ask you if you come on the show. So in March of 2022, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah explained his team building philosophy and said that he doesn't look at roster building in a binary way. He doesn't believe in A or B choice of tearing it down to the studs or going to trade all your draft pick like the Rams. He likes to live in the middle lane, being competitive while rebuilding the roster on the fly. So I tweeted something, I think either snarky or cocky, that said that some folks don't understand what's going on. They want them to be in one of the camps. And I think you replied, I'm one of the confused people. So I want to know, well, you might push back on that. My apologies.
No, I think my comment was like, I understand what they're doing, or I think I understand what they're trying. It wasn't so much confused as it was like,
oh, okay.
I feel like I have a pretty good idea for what they are trying to
Oh,
accomplish.
I thought you were
Yeah.
saying
So,
count me in as one of the confused folks.
no, no, no. And will you because we talked a little bit prior to this, and no, I mean I think I've had a now we could talk about this. I could talk about this for hours because I think the team building thing within the NFL is fascinating. But I think it is very challenging. I think just personally, my opinion, I think it's very challenging to do it the way they're trying to do it
Okay.
and succeed and thread the needle. But I'm not confused by it. Like I think the Daniil Hunter situation is a perfect representation for what they're trying to do with an elite player at a premium position. We're going to try to sign that guy. But if there is risk, it's going to be a short-term deal so we can keep the long-term wide open, I think, to be able to build it optimally for the long term. So I don't know if I explained that best, but you can maybe build off that and then I can continue to hash out kind of my thoughts about it.
I think you nailed it with Hunter. The reason that this one took so long is because he lived right on that bubble of the philosophy. Because if he was 26, 27, maybe, perhaps it was a no-brainer to add 3 years onto that thing and call it good. But he's right at what I guess Kwesi, in my opinion, would consider a tender spot of going to be 29 around Halloween, wants 20 to 25 million per year, presumably, ended up getting 17 plus incentives. So to me, it was always a no-brainer that he would let some of the aging guys who weren't on deck to get better, like Adam Thielen or Eric Kendricks. But then I think Hunter was the litmus test about, all right, what's he really going to do here? So when you say it's difficult to thread the needle, do you look at the business in a binary way? Do you think it's easier just to, all right, we're going 3-14, baby, or
No, it's a good question, and I don't, and it's funny because I thought about this when I covered baseball, but it is admirable, and I think it is good, and I think you should be rewarded for trying to win every year. Like I really do. Like I think if it's just like we're gonna rip it to the studs because that's the maybe mathematically optimal route to best team. Like I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think it is cool to see teams try to compete, and that is what the Vikings are trying to do every single year. Ownership wants to win. I mean, that is definitely something that I think matters. And so I think Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is trying to win every single year while also trying to set himself up optimally to build the team in a way that they can win the big one. So in terms of threading the needle, I think the challenge of it is like even Howie Roseman has been on the record saying like the year that we drafted Lane Johnson, we flipped it over and we weren't good at all. And that it helped you kind of have to take a hit to get back to the top. Like Howie Roseman is on record saying that he believes that's the approach that is probably most optimal. I just think it's tough when you're picking in the draft in the let's just say 18 to 24 range. Especially if your future at quarterback is murky. I just think it's a very difficult thing. Can it happen? Like you saw the Kansas City Chiefs win with Alex Smith, and then they traded up. They drafted Patrick Mahomes. It worked, obviously. I don't need to explain that to anybody. And then they've drafted well after that to continue to keep their team well-rounded. So I think it's difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. And I do think it's admirable that they've tried to do it the way that they have.
Josh, we got time for two more with Alec Lewis from The Athletic. Josh, what is your final question?
All right, this is my big one. So between you could go in a number of different ways here, but I mean, so many things are going to be different with this team. I think this upcoming season is going to look like a very different Vikings teams than years past. But what you could be like a scheme, like maybe the pass rush, maybe the rushing attack on offense, or a specific player. But what do you think is the Vikings' biggest X factor for the 2023 season for them to ultimately get to that mountaintop of the Super Bowl?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the offensive line. Like, I don't know if that's a boring.
No,
it might be boring. Yeah. But I mean, the more I watch these games, the more I talk to people, the more I listen to like schematic elements. Like, I think ultimately, if they're going to run the ball more efficiently, which I think they're going to have to get coverage, to get defenses to move coverage away from Justin Jefferson, like they're going to have to block well in the run game. And then I think I just have a hard time believing Kirk Cousins can take the types of hits that he did last year continuously. And I mean, I know he plays every game every year, but it's just I just don't think that's sustainable. And I also think to push the ball down the field from a passing attack perspective, the guys up front need to hold up. If I was refining it even more, I think it's the guard position and at center. Like I think I'm very confident Christian Darrisaw. I think he's an ascending player, arguably one of the best tackles in the league already. Brian O'Neill, I think, is going to return and be really good at right tackle as he has been. But that interior spot of the offensive line, I mean, I think that's really kind of where this thing makes or breaks what the Vikings are capable of offensively. And then the defense, I mean, again, I think it's orchestrated chaos, kind of roll the dice. Trust in a coordinator who has a lot of experience like Brian Flores does.
Yeah, and that's what makes this Dalton Reisner thing so fascinating to me as well, because like they could add that guy, and he's like a completely different type of guard than what we're used to with the Vikings. Between like he's much more of a pass protection type of player than a run blocker, and with those two guards, like Ed Ingram was a second-round pick last year. Ezra Cleveland's kind of risen over the past couple of years, at least in my opinion. I think he's gotten a little bit better as his NFL career has progressed. And what are they going to do with those three guys? Like that's going to be an interesting battle to watch if he ends up in Minnesota, I think.
Yeah, I think it was interesting to see that news yesterday for sure. I think the other thing is like as last year proved, you always need depth at these spots, like with the tackles, obviously, but at guard. And I mean, it's something that I don't need to say to anybody who's watched football, but if you have offensive line depth, you're going to give yourself like mathematically, we're talking probabilistically the way Quasito Fomensa does. That is a way to, I think, enhance your probability as you just think about the potential direction of the team.
Alec, Vikings fans are accustomed to a certain way of living since 2007 until now. And at running back, that is Adrian Peterson and Dalvin Cook. So while a league has evolved and adapted to more of especially if you play fantasy football, you know all about the implementation of RB2s. They used to make me cringe during fantasy drafts. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's going to ruin my RB1. But now I get excited about trying to scope who the team's RB2 is going to be. Well, Dalvin Cook doesn't work here anymore. He'll probably work for the Jets or the Dolphins or the Patriots. And I think when Alexander Madison re-signed to Minnesota, as Vikings fans, we collectively kind of said, oh, that's the RB1 now, which in spirit, he'll probably take the first handoff and everything of 2023. But would you forecast that Alexander Madison is going to get a Cook-like touch load? Or do you think because they have Ty Chandler, Kene Nwangwu, and Dwayne McBride that this is going to be an honest-to-goodness committee?
No, I think it's Alexander Madison getting the Cook-like touch load.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I do. This Vikings coaching staff, I know has believed in Alexander Madison going back to last year. I think if they had it their way, they probably would have gotten him more touches last year. And I think their confidence in him, and we'll see how it all pans out, is why they were very early in trying to bring him back. I think they see him as a three-down guy who can catch out of the backfield. If you've been at training camp, you've seen him catching a lot of passes on the edge, in the flat, over the middle. So I know some fans are very high on Ty Chandler, and Kene Nwangwu's name comes up, and Dwayne McBride is a UAB guy, and I'm from Birmingham. So, but I really do think Alexander Madison is going to get a bulk of the work. I think that's why they re-signed him. That's why he returned to be a Viking. And so, I think the run game efficiency is something that they have prioritized from the beginning of the offseason. I know they studied it a lot. The coaching staff did. I know they have really thought about how can we improve, how can we avoid the negative plays, how can we improve our overall efficiency to put ourselves in better situations on second down and third down and move the ball down the field more easily. And I think they think Alexander Madison is a way to be able to do that, along with a blocking scheme and some probably rush personnel groupings that are going to look a little different. But I think that combination is what this team's going to lean on in the run game more than any committee with a bunch of guys.
Real quick, I think Josh and I, based on the strength of the schedule, the roster talent, the way things went last year, I think he and I are kind of in a prediction boat of 11-6 or 10-7 if the team stays relatively healthy. What is your August 1st prognosis for the Vikings wins and losses if you're into that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was talking with somebody yesterday about it, but I do think like the 10-7 seems fair. It also seems to me on the optimistic end, and I think if they were to go 10-7, divisional win or not, like I think it would be a pretty impressive finish considering the schedule that they play. I mean, this is a gauntlet of a schedule in certain times, and so I've been saying 9-8, 10-7. I think somewhere around there makes sense, and I think that it with the schedule and just with the revamp of the defense, I think that all is just and thinking about last year and the one score success, I just put it all together. I think 9-8, 10-7 is probably where I am at right now. But I think the division is a total toss-up, and that's why I think you re-signed Danielle Hunter for a 1-year deal. I think that's why you don't trade certain high. Like I think there is a reason to think that the competitive part of the competitive rebuild makes sense, especially in a division that is such a toss-up. So I'm fascinated to see how it plays out. As you can probably tell, it's I think about it, ruminate about it way too much, but it's the fun part of it. It's what makes it fun.
All right, sir. Well, we sincerely appreciate you joining us. Do you have any closing arguments for the group?
No, I think I'm good. I hope Vikings fans are having a good time following this training camp. And I'll say I Justin Jefferson has been it's almost mind-boggling that he is going as hard as he is and doing. I mean, it's actually not mind-boggling. He's that good. But no, it's been fun to be out there, and I hope Vikings fans are enjoying following along, trying to do my best to bring some different stuff. I wrote about Ivan Pace today, the undrafted guy at The Athletic. So hope I'm doing enough to bring people to kind of learn some different stuff about the team on a daily basis.
And folks can read that at The Athletic. And what is your Twitter or X app handle?
Yeah, it's Alec _Lewis. So yeah, you can find me there. Probably tweeting way too much, but it's the name of the game. Or Xing. I don't know. Can I say that? I don't know.
No such thing, especially when you're getting some of those clapbacks that say you're annoying. That means you're doing the right thing. All right, my man. I'm going to invite you back in about a month or so if you had a good time. I hope that you join us once again. Until then, you guys take it easy. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Alec.
Later.
Yeah.